Welcome, friend. Welcome, seeker of true knowledge. Enter the temple of the dividend discount model. Here you will be initiated in the techniques and skills and sacred rites of valuing companies on the basis of their future dividends. Are you ready, seeker? Okay, enough of the mystical stuff. Hey, folks, it's really not that mysterious. The words are a little funny, definitely, and the calculations are actually very easy. So you're going to learn how to use the fabulous, fantastic, powerful, stodgy, and old-fashioned dividend discount models. Remembering that there are many other models out there. One popular group of models of fundamental analysis are the dividend discount models. Shares of stock are valued on the basis of the present value of the future dividend streams the stock is projected to produce. Well, if you recall from our previous presentation, we said the value of a stock is based on the present value, what's it worth today, of its future cash flows, money we'll get in the future. Therefore, dividend discount models should be extremely popular, right? Well, not always. During the late 1990s, investors who adhered to these types of dividends were considered old-fashioned, outdated fuddy-duddies. But those investors weathered the 2000 to 2002 bear market very well. Dividends have become important again. And remember, dividends don't lie. So let us take a look at the discount rate. Here it comes. Here comes the silly words that we use. You know, we're going to not use the term discount rate often, but you're going to hear it, and that's one of the names for it. We're going to use required rate of return, or expected rate of return, or desired rate of return. But the discount rate is very important for the dividend discount models. Why? Because we choose, that's the required rate of return that we choose to calculate the value of the shares of the stock using these models. And the predicted valuations, the results, are very sensitive to our discount rate, to our required rate of return. So just get used to it now, okay? Get used to the fact that it's called the discount rate. But we will, as in the course of our class, mostly use terms like required rate of return, desired rate of return, expected rate of return. The fact that everyone has a different required rate of return means that different investors will expect and demand different stock prices. Someone might be happy with 6, 7%. Others might want 8, 9, 10%. And then there are people who want 15% or more. And this is a wonderful quote that's attributed to Mark Twain. I don't know if he actually said it, but it definitely applies here. It is the difference of opinion that makes horse races. In other words, everyone doesn't bet on the same horse. Sometimes they do. You know, sometimes you get a stock or a few stocks like we have now that are valued at outrageous amounts of money. And, you know, there might be a reason why it's so, and it might not be a reason why it's so, and that's what makes horse races, and everybody doesn't bet on the same horse. Let's take a look at the first model. Now, you want to print out the formula sheet for Chapter 4. Make sure you have it there, and you want to study these, and we're going to do them. We're going to do the calculations, so don't worry. You're going to do them over and over and over again. And it turns out the calculations are really not that hard. Remember, we promised you could do it all with a 99-cent calculator. And it is true. The zero growth model just assumes the dividends will continue at a fixed rate indefinitely into the future. So in other words, we're just buying the stock for the dividend income we receive. And that is it. and we don't expect it to grow. We're not worried about the capital appreciation. We're just going to buy this stock as if it were a savings account. So if a stock were paying us $3 a share and our required rate of return were 6%, we would take the annual dividends, $3, divided by 6%, and that's 0.06, by the way, 0.06 on your calculator. Make sure you figure that out. Remember, 6% is por ciento by 100, so you divide it by 100, or just move the decimal place to the left, 0.06, and you get $50 a share. We would, if we were just buying the stock for the dividends that we received, and not worried about any growth or anything, we would expect to pay at least $50 a share. Now, if it were selling for a little less, that's a good deal. If it were selling for more, we'd say, well, I don't know. And if this looks familiar, that's because it's simply another way to view the dividend yield that we discussed in the previous chapter. Now, if you don't understand what I'm talking about on slide number 9, don't worry about it. It's for the more math fans. But if you remember the dividend yield formula, we took the annual dividends divided by the market price of the stock. Now, when we're dividing, we can simply swap this guy with this guy, and that's exactly what we do. The value of the stock and the required rate of return, we just swap them, and that gives us the dividend yield. The dividend yield is equal to the annual dividends divided by the market price of the stock. The value of the stock, or in other words, what we believe the market price should be, is equal to the annual dividends divided by the required rate of return. So if you really hate math and hate division and hate numbers and everything, just ignore this slide. But what it's saying is investors who emphasize the zero growth model are valuing the stock almost exclusively for its dividend yield. What is the current income the stock is generating from its dividends? So now let's take a look at a real world example on slide number 10. You may have heard of Consolidated Edison, Con Ed, especially if you have lived on the East Coast of the United States, because Con Ed is the utility company for the city of New York and environs. It's been around since the early 1800s, before there even was distributed electricity. And so it's been around the block a few times, certainly, hasn't it? Yes. The current market price as of the 23rd of February was $85.30. And they're currently paying $3.16 per year in annual dividends. And they've been paying that, actually, they just raised it a tiny little bit just recently. So we look at a utility. When you see a utility, you know what model to use, zero growth model, okay? Those are utilities aren't going anywhere unless people want to start taking cold showers in the dark. People want their gas and electric to be delivered to them. So what is our required rate of return is the question we have to ask ourselves. What is the discount rate? Ugh, what a terrible name, but that's what it's called, folks. So think about desired rate of return, expected rate of return, required rate of return, or discount rate. So let's use 8%. If we take the $3.16 divided by 8%, we get $39.50. Ew. What is that saying? Well, the stock is way overpriced. People want $85.30 for a share, and we believe it's worth $39.50 if our required rate of return is 8%. Well, let's try lowering the discount rate. Let's say lower our required rate of return to 5%. If we take $3.16 divided by 0.05, 5%, go ahead, do it on your calculator, make sure you can do it. That gives us $63.20. The stock is still too expensive if our required rate of return is 5%. So, with a market price of $85.30, the stock is yielding 3.70%. Yeah, in other words, it's not giving us a whole lot of income now. And so people are willing to assume a lower rate of return from their dividend yielding stocks that really aren't growing. And that's because bonds are paying very little and right now, And savings accounts are paying nothing, right? You saw that when you did your chapter 1 assignment. So hey, what are you going to say? You want the income, you're going to have to pay for it a lot more than what we would normally expect from a stock. I like to see 6, 7, 8, 7, 8, 9, 8, 9, 10% from a stock. You're probably not going to get it from Consolidated Edison. But what you are going to get is a utility company that's been around for almost 200 years and isn't going to go anywhere. Do you want to eat well or do you want to sleep well? That's the zero growth model. And it is very, very straightforward. Take the annual dividends, divide it by our required rate of return. Now, what can we do? What model can we use if the dividends are growing? The Gordon growth model, named after Dr. Gordon, the University of Toronto, who did this back in the 1970s, I think. It's also called the constant perpetual growth model, which is kind of a silly name because constant and perpetual mean kind of the same thing, don't they? Anyway, this assumes that the dividends will continue to grow at a specified rate perpetually. You like that word? I guess you get to spit on your friends when you say it. I'm using the constant perpetual growth model to perpetually which are companies with companies that are perpetually growing their dividend into the future. And so what we do is we take the zero growth model, which is right on the left-hand side of this formula, and then we add a couple of terms to the right. We take the annual dividends, and then we multiply them times 1 plus the dividend growth rate. Now notice that's in parentheses. You got to do that first. And then on the bottom, we take our required rate of return, desired rate of return, expected rate of return, discount rate, and we subtract the dividend growth rate. And then make sure you do what's on the top first, and then what's on the bottom, and then do the division. Do the division last. If you try to throw it all together on your calculator, you're probably not going to get the correct result. And that has to do with what's called precedence and order of operation, and we don't want to get into that. But just make sure you do what's in the parentheses first, then do the numerator, and then do the denominator, and you will be fine. Now let's take a look. Let's say we're looking at a company that's been growing their dividends at 5%, and they're paying $1 per share. So that means next year we expect to see $1.05. You see how that works? Yeah, next year 1 plus 5% is 1.05. So 1.05 times $1 gives us $1.05. So if our required rate of return is 10%, then the formula looks like this. $1 times 1.05, which we said is $1.05. That's pretty straightforward. And then we do the bottom before we do the division. Don't do the division before you do the bottom, the denominator. So 10% minus 5%, that's 0.10 minus 0.05 is 0.05, 5%, 0.05. And so $1.05 divided by 0.05 gives us $21. So the model is saying the stock is worth $21 a share. Okay, that's what the model says. Is that what the price is going to be? I doubt it. The price might be more or less. But the model is pointing us to a price if we want a 10% rate of return of $21. Of course, if we change the required rate of return, it's going to change the result. And that's why we said these models are very sensitive to your required rate of return. So now let's take a look at some real life examples. You might have heard of 3M. Maybe you didn't hear the company. They used to be called Minnesota Mining and Materials. 3M, cute, ha ha ha. But you use their products all the time, folks. You ever hear of Post-it notes or Scotch tape? They make all kinds of, they make tens of thousands of products. A lot of them are flat, like reflecting tape. They also make masks. So as of February 23rd, the price was $146.08. They are currently paying $5.96. And let's assume that the dividends are growing at 8% into the future. So now, let's say we want 13% out of this stock. It's kind of much to expect out of a stock, in my humble opinion, especially a company that's been around for, I don't know, decades. I don't know exactly how long they've been around, but it's been a long time. So let's try it. $5.96 of annual dividends times 1.08. Remember, the dividends are growing at 8%. Let's assume that. Divided by 13% minus 8%, 0.13 minus 0.08. On the numerator, that gives us $5.96 times 1.08 gives us 6.4368, about $6.44 or so. Divided by 0.05, because 13 minus 8% is 5% or 0.05, and that gives us about $128.74, which the model is saying, it's not a particularly great choice if we require 13%, because it's selling for $146. We believe at 13%, it's only worth $128.74. What if our required rate of return were only 10%? Okay, let's run it again. The only thing it changes is the discount rate, is the required rate of return, is the expected rate of return, desired rate of return. They all mean the same thing. In other words, what do we expect? $5.96 times 1.08 gives us 6.4368 again. Now, 10% minus 8% is 0.02, right? 2%. Make sure you can do that. Make sure you can do it. Do it on your calculator. And that gives us $321.84. Wait a minute. Let me check that on my calculator. Does that sound right? Where's my calculator? Because all of a sudden I'm thinking, that seems a little high. I can't find my calculator, but that's okay. Yes, I can. I'm going to try it. You do it too. You do it while I'm doing it. You do it while I'm doing it, because I'm going to try right now. 6.4368 divided by 0.02. Oh yeah, $321.84. And it's only selling for $146. So you see, the model is very sensitive to our choice of the required rate of return. We go from 13% down to 10%, and the price jumps from $128 to $321. Yes. What do we expect from a stock? Do you think G3M is a good value? Do you use Scotch tape, Post-it notes, tens of thousands of other products that this company makes, specialty materials? Yes, they're part of the Dow Jones Industrial Average, if you didn't notice in the last chapter. Yes, they've been around forever. So let's take a look at another example here. AbbVie. AbbVie, what a silly name. They're a pharmaceutical company that was spun off from Abbott Labs, which is another company that's been around forever, that has made people very wealthy over time. And so Abbott Labs and AbbVie are now two different companies, and they're both been pretty darn good investments. The current market price as of the 23rd of February was $146.50, and currently paying $5.42 in annual dividends. Again, let's assume that dividends are growing around 8% per year. Our required rate of return is 13%. So let's start with 13% again. $5.42 times 1.08 divided by 13% minus 8%. So you do the numerator first. $5.42 times 1.08, 5.8536. In the numerator, 13% minus 8% is 0.05. Take 5.8536 divided by 0.05, and that gives us $117.07. The model is telling us that, you know what, you really should not expect a 13% return. Okay, well, let's try 10%. Let's take $5.42 times 1.08 divided by 10% minus 8%. And that gives us the 5.8536. That doesn't change. But the 10% minus 8% is now 0.022%. And that gives us $292.68. Wow. AbbVie looks like a screaming good deal. Remember, these are just pointing us to companies that are like AbbVie. It doesn't mean we should run out and buy AbbVie. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it it points us at a company like AbbVie. Now, this is just the beginning. We have to spend a whole lot more time researching their products, their competitors, their customers, their suppliers, the marketplace, whether they're global in nature. This is just a way to put our finger up in the air and see which way the wind is blowing. Yes, you're getting the idea. This is not a yay or nay. It's not a red light or green light or anything. It's just pointing us towards companies that we believe are going to give us a decent rate of return. And again, we're looking for 7, 8, 9, 10%. I'm happy with 7 or 8% over the long term now because I'm older. You younger folks, you might want 10, 11%, but that's why there's horse races, right? That's what makes horse races. And by the way, there's a link on the website and in Canvas about a woman who started working at Abbott Labs, which spun off AbbVie, by the way, when she was in her 20s, bought 3 shares of stock when she started as a secretary. And then when she passed away, she donated the stock and it was worth like 1.8 million or something straight. That's an outrageous amount of 1.3 million or something like that. So yeah, long-term growth of companies is good. Slide number 14, Illinois Toolworks. Huh? Who or what is Illinois Toolworks? They're one of those companies that have been around for over 100 years, and you never hear about them, but you are surrounded by their products, and you don't even know it. The current market price as of the February 23rd date was $213.70. Currently paying $4.88 in annual dividends, and let's assume the dividends are growing at around 8% a year. The required rate of return is 13%. So $4.88 times 1.08. Hopefully you've been doing these. Pause the presentation. Do them. They're not that hard. 99-cent calculator. Divided by 13% minus 8%. Remember, do the numerator first, then the denominator, then divide. And we get $5.27, a little bit more, divided by 0.05, or $105. Not so good. But if we lower our required rate of return to 10%, then when we run the numbers, we get $263.53. Maybe we ought to spend more time researching a company that we never even knew existed until today called Illinois Toolworks. What do you think? Boring. Yeah, I know. This model points us to boring companies. But you know what? In the investment world, in my humble opinion, boring is good. Another boring company, member of the Dow Jones Industrial Average, is Caterpillar. And what do they make? You know what they make. Bulldozers and tractors. I don't know. Do they actually make tractors? I don't think so. It's John Deere and Harvester. But they make earth-moving equipment. Yes, heavy equipment. They've been around forever. They're in the Dow, as I said. Current market price is $189.50 on this February 23rd. And they're currently paying $4.44 in annual dividends. Again, we're assuming that the dividends are growing at around 8% a year. If our required rate of return is 13%, $95.90 does not look so good if we want 13%. But how about 10%? 10%, when we run the numbers, we wind up with $239.76. If we're happy with a 10% rate of return, Caterpillar appears to deliver. Again, we need to do a whole lot more research before we actually go out and buy Caterpillar, look at their competitors, look at the market. They're a global company, so we have to see what's going on globally. Did you know that they also own Solar Turbines? Did you know that? Which is based here in San Diego. It's been here in San Diego for decades. And they're right downtown, right by the airport. And also they have a big facility up in Kearny Mesa too. So there you go. There's a local connection. Caterpillar. And our final choice, our final example, will be Altria. Who's Altria? What a silly name. Well, it used to be Philip Morris. That's the name they used to be. And they sell cigarettes. That's the symbol Mo for Morris. Yeah, they've been around for decades and been giving people cancer for 100 years or so. And yes, the current market price is $51.24 as of 23rd of February. And they're currently paying $3.60 and assume the dividends are also growing at 8% per year. So the same required rate of return of 13%, and you get $3.60 times 1.08 or 3.888 divided by 13 minus 8 or 0.05, and that's $77.76. Our model says that Altria is worth $77.76 if we expect a 13% return on our investment. What a buy if you conveniently ignore the fact that tobacco kills 400,000 Americans every year. And one of the companies they split off was Philip Morris International that sells the cigarettes, Virginia Dims and Marlboro outside the United States. So here's a strange company. It's based in the United States. It doesn't do any business inside the United States, does all its business outside the United States. Would you buy Altria? Would you buy a company whose product, when used as directed, kills its consumers? Well, you know what? It's been a pretty darn good investment because it makes a couple of pennies to make a cigarette and they sell 20 of them for $10. But all three of the big companies, the Marlboro makers in the United States, Altria, the Marlboro makers outside the United States, Philip Morris, and British American Tobacco, which owns Camel and Newport and all those others, they all said, look, we're looking past tobacco, cigarettes. We're looking past that. And they talk about, other types of, I know what they're talking about. They're talking about marijuana. They're salivating. They're waiting for marijuana to finally become legal. And then they're going to become like Anheuser-Busch and Seagram 7. They're going to be selling a legal vice. And I think they're going to do pretty darn well, folks. But we'll see. You never know. It's the future. That's why they call it the future. And a little story. How are we doing for time? Not bad. I used to watch this show called Wall Street Week. On a long time ago, before most of you were born, there weren't any shows on television about investing. There was one on that communist, pinko liberal network called PBS, Public Broadcasting System, called Wall Street Week with Louis Rukeyser. And every week he would have on a different money manager or some type of investor. One time he had a gentleman who was a mutual fund manager who was very bullish, as we say, on Altria, which was then called Philip Morris. And Mr. Louis Rukeyser pressed him. He said, now, I don't remember his name. So you're a Mormon, aren't you? Oh, yes, sir, I'm Mormon. And you don't even smoke cigarettes. And he says, oh, no, sir, I don't smoke cigarettes. So how do you square the fact that you're investing in this company and you don't even imbibe in their product? He said, well, there are no secrets. If anybody wants to put a cigarette in their mouth, it's their, choice. They should know that they're cutting their life short. But my job is to have a good return for my investors, and so as long as people are buying it, I'll invest in it. Some of you might feel that's not a good pact to make. And that's why there are mutual funds that have not invested in tobacco or alcohol for decades. You have to decide. Would you buy Altria? Okay, let's continue. Oh, who was that? Who is that? What was that?
No.
Who are you? Who is this?
You know who it is.
It's my conscience.
Come clean.
Come clean about what?
Fess up.
Fess up about what?
Where did you get the assumed dividend growth, huh?
I made them up.
Huh?
I made them up. All these companies are growing their dividends faster than 8%.
That's better.
Oh, don't you hate it when your conscience comes a-calling? Yes, dear students, we have been assuming an 8% rate of return because remember, there's lots of moving parts here. The Gordon growth model is very sensitive to the assumed growth rate of dividends as well as the required rate of return. The recent dividend growth rates of 3M, AbbVie, Illinois Tool Works, Caterpillar, and Altria are all 8% or higher. Caterpillar is 8.4. Altria is 8.9. 3M 10.4. Illinois Tool Works 14.6. And AbbVie is an astounding 18.6%. But the model does not work if the required rate of return is equal to or less than the dividend growth rate. Try it. You get division by zero or negative prices. So therefore, we should actually raise our expected rates of return for all these companies. According to the model, all are actually better buys than what the model is telling us for our 10% or 13% rate of return. Now note that these are blue chip companies with long histories of rising dividends, but they are not alone. They are not alone. They tend to be the more boring companies. And lately, it has been harder and harder to find good prospects using this model, which means that stocks are just very expensive. But we knew that already. We knew that going in. We said that stocks are very expensive. Lately, some of the high flyers have been really hit hard because of recent events that we won't have to remind anybody of, and the prospect of inflation and the higher interest rates from the Federal Reserve Bank and an invasion. But this, to me, is a continuation of my optimism for the future. Even though stocks are still pretty high, in general, there are some really good buys. I think some good stocks out there that are decent buys. The news is good about the future. If we don't blow ourselves up, die in our own way, start World War III, meteorite that destroys half the world, whatever, I'm very optimistic. Economically, investing wise. Politically, I'm scared to death. Oh well, that's a different class. Slide number 18. Academia and the pursuit of the perfect model leads us to change things that are pretty darn good and make them worse. And that's slide number 18. The constant growth model, which assumes dividends will continue to grow at a specified rate for a specified number of years. Folks, what they did is they took the Gordon growth model, that's this thing here in math speak. Dividends times 1 plus the growth rate. Notice they don't use a multiply sign. Divided by required rate of return, discount rate minus the growth rate. That's the dividend growth rate. That's the Gordon growth model that we just looked at. The left side. And then they add this term to account for the growth for a number of years. And the T stands for time, number of years. And the question mark stands for, do we really have to know this? And the answer is no. This model takes the Gordon growth model one step further, adding a term to account for the constant growth for a number of years. Just as the Gordon growth model evolved from the zero growth model, adding an additional term to account for the consistent growth of dividends. Look, the number of years, 3, 4, 5, is about all we would ever want to believe we could begin to see into the future. And we're going to come back to that in our next presentation, or we're going to come back to that in just a bit, so stick with us. Do we have to know this model? No. I'm not going to ask you this model. You can play with it if you want. It's up to you. And then they took it even further. They took the constant growth model, which is here, the two terms on the left side, and added these terms, the two-stage dividend growth model, the multi-stage growth model, the variable growth model, assumes dividends will continue to grow at a specified rate into the future, presumably the fast growth stage, and then grow at a second, presumably slower growth stage rate once the company matures. Look, this model may look very impressive, especially to those who love math, but it has some serious problems. It is very difficult to accurately predict future dividend growth during the initial fast growth stage of a stock. Usually, companies in their fast growth stages don't pay any dividends because they need the money to grow the business. And most importantly, you're going to read The Intelligent Investor eventually. Don't try it as your first book. Many decades ago, Benjamin Graham, who wrote The Intelligent Investor and was Warren Buffett's teacher, warned against using overly sophisticated mathematical models to value stocks. It sure looks pretty, especially to mathematicians, But does it resemble reality? I don't think so. So do you have to learn it? No, we're not going to use it. And I put it there to show you that there are many models out there, many of which we really are not that interested in. We like to keep things simple. And the Gordon growth model is pretty darn simple, folks. Okay, to sum up, slide 20. Let's take a look at some of the observations of the dividend discount models. How do you use these versions of the models for companies that aren't paying any dividends? Well, the simple answer is you can't. With no dividends, the model says they're worth nothing because 0 times anything is 0. No dividends, they're not worth anything. Dividend growth rates are very difficult to estimate with large, well-established companies. Historical growth rates may be useful. They often are, sometimes not. But with fast-growing companies in new industries, it is almost impossible since most fast-growing companies are not paying any dividends. So that's why you'll hear people say, oh, I don't even want dividends. I want the fast-growing companies that aren't paying dividends. Fine. That's their decision, and they want 15% or more return. So what can we do? We can't use the Gordon growth model, but oh boy, wait till you see our next presentation, because we're going to see a version of a dividend discount model that will allow us to value companies even though they don't pay dividends. Oh boy, are you in for a treat. But the problems of the dividend discount models notwithstanding, repeat after me. The value of a stock is based on the present value of its future cash flows. Okay, so now, rising investment gurus, you are ready. You have entered the temple, and now you are going to be initiated in the discounted cash flow model. You will be true, official, full-fledged investment gurus. See you in our next presentation.